have the power. You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite!
Hello, and if you're watching, this is Sunday's edition, the 7th of January, and we are joined by James Rossi, who's a regular presenter, and of course our wonderful overseas American geopoliticist, Sarah. Hello, Sarah, how are you, and how are you, James?
Good, thank you. Happy New Year and Merry Orthodox Christmas Eve.
Thank you very much. James, are you well?
I'm good, thank you. It's nice to see you both.
Yeah, lovely. We're going to dive straight in. I'm just going to ask people, first of all, to go over to Patreon at the Real Truth 502 if you wish to support the show. And that is where you can see the daily news channel. We do put it up as well on Telegram, and we advertise it on Twitter. It's completely free. If you want to donate, absolutely great. If you don't want to see this show, but you'd like to watch the longer interviews, please go to the Frontline Army, and you can see longer interviews with all sorts of wonderful people. So, are we ready for some proper news rather than propaganda?
I mean, ready? No, but yes, the news in 2024 is already not crazy.
So, Sarah, let's dive straight in here, and let's talk about what's happening this week with a massive Russian missile strikes. What's been going on there?
So Russia opened up the new year. I believe it was it was between the 27th and the 29th of December. They did a massive drone raid, a 36-hour-long drone raid across the whole state of Ukraine, opening up the air defense systems, exhausting them, making them deplete their ammunition. And while all of that is kind of going on, Ukraine decides to hit a Russian landing ship with British Storm Shadow missiles, which was mostly just a PR win. It had no direct effect on the actual war, which is always kind of what Ukraine does when, we're running low on ammo, we're running low on public interest. Let's do some sort of big to do. So that's what that happened during the course of the Garen strikes, and then the actual strike package began. And while this strike package is going on, Ukraine once again decides to conduct a terrorist attack on Russian soil, bombs the Christmas market in Belgorod, and I don't think that had anything to do with the strikes, but kind of legitimized them in a way, because the strike package was prepared before these attacks happened. So these are not retaliatory strikes on Russia's part. The retaliation is still coming. But Ukraine, in their intelligence, stupidity, decided to conduct these horrible attacks during the strike, almost legitimizing that entire strike package. Russia did 500 missiles across a week-long period, destroying mostly military targets and logistics hubs, but most importantly, and I have great news for everybody, they destroyed the manufacturing center that creates Zelensky's green sweaters. So we may run out of Zelensky's green sweaters in the year 2024, and I think that is really good news, something that everybody can look forward to, and Zelensky being upset is just icing on the cake for me. So And also, a thing that was interesting is that Alex from the Duran suggested that these strikes are actually because NATO was looking to supply more weapons, and this is basically Russia saying don't even try it.
Was that Christoforou or
Mercurius? Not Christoforou. Alex. Yeah, the British one. So yeah, he had a really interesting monologue on Danny Haiphong's show the other day talking about it. But while we're at it, Ukraine has run out of air defense missiles, air defense ammunition. So Europe is actually scrambling to provide these systems and this ammunition while Russia is creating more and more large strike packages. So I think that there's no end in sight, no light at the end of the tunnel for Ukraine. But I think that I'm not sure what the Western handlers are thinking, but the air superiority has reached an all-time high, and Russian jets are just all over the place, and so are the drones. And Kiev took it really hard as well. So really interesting things happening. And Putin also alluded to the fact that this type of campaigns would continue and would increase. So or maybe a large ground offensive for Russia coming in the spring as well.
Yeah, absolutely. James, they were very much along those lines of what Sarah was saying. Every time Russia seemed to hit these targets, and they hit a major a factory that was, pumping out various military hardware. Every time the Russians have some sort of major victory, they take time out of their busy day fighting the Russians to the Ukrainians, and have done over the last 2 years, and previously they did it for the last 8 years, to bomb civilians. What the hell do they think they are achieving there?
I think it's an act of desperation. There is the element that we've seen it with Ukraine even before the war, especially in the Donbass region and eastern Ukraine, where they did do that. They were shelling civilian infrastructure on a regular basis, which is why Russia initially went in. On the fact that they're running out of air defense missiles and weapons, that doesn't surprise me. We discussed that earlier today, yesterday, where we were talking about the fact that they're running out of ammunition. The thing that does puzzle me, though, Warren, is if America's looking to push this to a wider conflict, and if America wants a wider conflict, which it quite possibly does, and I believe it does, they can't keep up at the moment. How on earth do they plan to keep up on a massive war scale?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about running out of weapons, Sarah. Zelensky's running out of men. And he's absolutely desperate for other people to be pulled into this. But we've had this desperation already, and we've had the first draft, and then we had the second one where they started throwing even younger people and dragging them out of universities, and then we had the beating them up and throwing them into vans, and then we had now we've had people with mental illnesses and mental disabilities, and we've even had pregnant women thrown on the front line. What's next? Is it toddlers and people pulling them out of their deathbeds? Where's Zelensky getting these 500,000 new troops from?
Well, we're closing down borders. We are now recruiting women. Women can't leave the country. They've made uniforms that are appropriate for pregnant women. So I think that Ukraine's in it for the long haul, especially Zelensky. Lindsey Graham said to the last Ukrainian, and I think Zelensky and Zelensky took that to heart, and they are willing to go to the last Ukrainian. Sad for the Ukrainians, and now they're kind of asking their European friends to start deporting the Ukrainians back. They're not going to come back to die in a Russian meat grinder in Avdiivka or Kramatorsk. So I don't. Again, we talked about the ammo depletion, and now you're talking about the personnel depletion. What has to happen for them to say, enough is enough? So I'm not sure. It's very bleak. The outlook is very bleak for Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. We were touching on you touched on there that they were saying, that the US were trying to get all this manufacturing and everything else. Zelensky running out of green jumpers. But there's a lot of nonsense, James. There's a lot of nonsense going on, and we'll come to Sarah after that. There's a lot of nonsense going on from the US media, where they're saying they want, first of all, I want to know if this is USA backing out of this war with Ukraine, or just trying to get more people, because it seems to be mixed signals, because they're saying they want Ukraine to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Well, Ukraine couldn't stand on their own 2 feet with all the help in the world. If they stop helping them and putting more aid packages together, they're just going to go downhill faster, aren't they? They're saying they've got to be able to defend themselves, but they can't defend themselves with all of NATO's help at the moment. The problem, isn't it, James?
It is a problem. I don't think it's so much they want to stand on their own 2 feet. America knows they can't put boots, like large amounts of boots on the ground. There are obviously some British, American, French, German personnel there, either in a training capacity or a special ops capacity, a bit like we see in most war zones. But what they're trying to do is obviously drag Poland in and get Poland to put men on the front line. They've done it with a few other Eastern European countries without a lot of success. I think this is what's going on with the situation in Serbia. Serbia is not playing ball. So, they're trying to overthrow the government there, a bit like they did with Ukraine. If they can get them Eastern European countries to throw more troops in, it's it wins on both fronts. First of all, if it goes to a wider conflict, that's a win. If it doesn't go to a wider conflict, it prolongs the war because it's more manpower to throw at the front line. So it's kind of a win-win, especially for the military-industrial complex, especially for the people that have got a lot of money invested in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, I'll come to you. Blinken has been drinking the Kool-Aid, hasn't he? Because he's been going on about, lately in the media, about North Korea helping Russia. Oh, my God, shock horror. The fact that South Korea have been helping Ukraine, he forgot to mention, or that half the Western world, or 3/4 of the Western world, has been arming Russia. But it's very, very naughty, isn't it, of the North Koreans or the Iranians to help their friends Russia out. But it's perfectly okay for South Korea to help out Ukraine, is it?
Correct. And we're seeing a rising east and a declining west, and with the rising east comes the rise of North Korea, who has more than once expressed their aspirations for reunification. That is a goal of the DPRK, is reunification. And if you notice, there was an attempted assassination on an opposition candidate in South Korea recently. I believe he's okay and he survived the attack, but he was a pro-reunification, pro-China candidate. So the United States is very fearful that there is a kind of a sentiment going on there, positive sentiment towards reunification of the peninsula, which for the world would be a great thing, but for the United States would be a horrible thing. So of course they're going to amplify this message. And you, along with many others, thankfully, have pointed out the hypocrisy in this, where they have tried to pull weapons from everywhere, even South America, to give to Ukraine. And because North Korea wants to test their new missiles in Ukraine, that's a huge issue. Well, no, it's not. For all of the normal people in the world that see it this way, are like, that's normal. That's what countries are doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Talk to me of what you think about the various. We're going to go through a few of them now. James was alluding to trying to pull other people into the war. Poland looking like they're making lots of noise in that area. But we've also got once again the USA trying to do the usual colour revolution riots, start killing people, money-backed insurgents into Serbia to try and get regime change there. And we've seen a very limited, but it's on the way, Armenian little push with Heli Arnaud of the French intelligence services, who was crawling around in Ukraine in 2020, suddenly being made the defence attaché in Serbia, and suddenly we're seeing a so-called Nazi party spring up out of nowhere, aren't we, Sarah?
Yeah, and and people need to understand that Serbia is consistently the victim of this sort of thing, these sort of attempts, and they were actually the first color revolution of the color revolution series in Eastern Europe in the 90s. They were the bulldozer revolution with Otpor, a George Soros funded propaganda machine ran by younger people, college age students. That was the blueprint for Georgia then after, for their Rose Revolution, for the Armenian Electro-Maidan, and then for the Maidan in 2014 in Ukraine. So Serbia is very familiar with this formula. And because Serbia has been smart enough to avoid joining the EU and NATO, their people have remembered and they haven't been brainwashed into forgetting what happened in the 90s. So, we see this kind of pseudo Maidan popping up. We all say the same thing. Wow, it's the same time of year. We're seeing tents. It's just like the Maidan. All we need are some cookies, maybe Victoria Nuland or Samantha Power, maybe Victoria Nuland Jr. I like to call her. But every Serbian that I talk to is literally like, we're not taking this seriously. This is really a joke. Just let them burn themselves out, and time will take care of it. And we see that and I can't recall his name right now, but they have their own Mikhail Saakashvili. He's just some random Kosovar with criminal background that they're now propping up as some victim of the Serbian regime. And we all know the Serbian regime is quite moderate. and leans further west than I would like them to anyway. So it's kind of like they should just be happy with what they have there. And I think you mentioned before we started is that George Soros owns tons of industry in the Balkans, but they always have. That's always been a place of injecting foreign aid, NED, USAID, these kind of keeping that area in constant fluctuation, keeping Kosovo and now we have Kosovo is allowing people out into the EU without visas. Like there's a lot of things happening in the Balkans. That's another hot spot. I think it's the next hot spot before Armenia, which you've already mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. James, this is just another CIA Victoria Nuland, what do they call it? National Endowment for Democracy, Guatemala, Venezuela. I mean, you name it. This is the CIA have been doing this, which is just another name, isn't it? The CIA have been doing this since 1947. This is just another attempt, isn't it? Overthrow.
No, it definitely is another attempt to overthrow, and we've seen a lot of it, sort of in the 90s. And sort of mid to late 90s, early 2000s, up into the late 2000s, of a lot of that happening in the Middle East region and in African regions. And now we've seen it in Ukraine, we're seeing it in Serbia. It's frightening, really, that that they're so open and blatant about it now. Before they were a little bit more covert about it, but now it's a lot more out in the open. It's like they don't care. We're going to do it. We don't care, if you surmise this or you think this or you think that. It's, I think the big question is, Warren, and this is a question for you, is how do we stop this from happening? Because it can't go on.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is people talk about a revolution and getting out on the streets and everything. It's not really going to cause a lot. All they're going to do is shoot you. Really, the only way you can beat them at their own game is to get your own independence in. I mean, there's a guy in Britain called Andrew Bridgen, who is the only one, and I'm going to mention this again because he is the only politician out of all 640 who dared to stand up against the COVID narrative that is out there. And here's the wonderful thing. He texts me to let me know that on the day when he's got his big debate in the Houses of Parliament, suddenly on that day he gets an invitation to go to Davos. What a surprise that is. And just so you know, all the pilots that fly the people out to Davos, not one of them is allowed to be vaccinated. Isn't that strange? Very, very simply. Nikki, what do you... we'll get on to Nikki in a minute. Sarah, what do you think... what's the answer? How do we go about this? Do we overthrow them at their own game, get independent people in, or is there another way?
If you're talking about the UK, yes, I think it's time to start developing that independent party because Keir Starmer has ruined Labour and it will never be fixed, I don't think, while he's alive. No. And, we've seen these sort of people that start out as kind of like these grassroots Muslims or at least grassroots leftists, and then they kind of get co-opted into this weird money, like exactly what you said, that sort of Davos thing. And I'm not really understanding why these politicians can't stay away, but now we're seeing an uprising in people that are leaving the party and going independent, and then people that are challenging the party from the outside with independence. So I think for the UK right now, I think an independent party is kind of your only hope. It's not the same in the United States. It doesn't really work that way. But the opportunity for the Brits is there, and I think that they should take it. You have a raving Zionist on either side of the aisle, yes. And just like we do, and when you have no alternative, you create your own. So I think that Britain is poised for a very, very nice grassroots uprising of independent MPs, a wave, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. James, would you, Keir Starmer, he'd sell his own grandmother to get into power, wouldn't he? This is just British politicians, rather like American ones, who just turn around and say, I want my spoon to go in the gravy. And there'll be a whore for whoever pays them, whether that be Big Pharma, whether that be Monsanto, or whether that be the military-industrial complex, isn't it?
Yes. The comment about Keir Starmer, I totally agree. And also I agree with Sarah on the fact that he's very much on the side of the Zionists. 40% of Labour is funded by Zionists or Israeli connections, and again, heavily funded on the Conservative side. So whichever team you go with, it's the same team. I did do a video yesterday, funnily enough, on my TikTok, and on that video, we was talking about what's going on, in particular with regards to Palestine. But at the end of the video, I did go on to politics a little bit and talk about where the problems lie, how the problems need to be looked at, and what people should be paying attention to. And I did emphasise voting for these independent parties, like you've got the UK Reform Party, you've got the Workers' Party, you've got the Green Party, and there's a couple of others. But I kind of emphasised that if everybody votes for one of those parties and enough votes go to those parties, those parties could potentially form a coalition, which would be a different government. And as I said at the end of the video, they can't do any worse than the corrupt bunch we've got at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of the corrupt bunch, Sarah, let's get on to one of the, I'm going to use bad English here, but the corruptest and most whorest sort of person you have over in the United States. Shall we say, ready to accept it from anyone who's willing to give it to her. Nikki Haley, the Democrats are also backing her campaign as well, aren't they?
Oh, Nikki Haley, the darling of the military-industrial complex. And she's not the only one. She's just the one in the front right now. What is her real name? What is her real name? And she doesn't go by it. She's an Indian-American woman who is a raving Zionist lunatic. I believe she said, bomb them all. Yeah. Her husband constantly deployed. She's literally an example of why we should not have a female president. And this is really bad, and actually sets women back in the United States a good couple decades. But like you said, she's got a ton of constantly saying. You brought up the military-industrial complex money being injected into her campaign on both sides. If you notice her tweets, they are always about the military. They're always about being a military wife, always about my husband is deployed, always, always, always about that. That is always a focal point of her tweets. Now she's poising herself as this a kind of worried military wife with a deployed husband, and she's just trying to make sure he's safe around the world. But there's a humongous injection of enormous funding from the military-industrial complex, and that's kind of a running joke here. So yes, she trends on Twitter, but I don't really see her popularity surging to the point where she could even get into any elected position at all. Maybe VP, and that's a stretch, but I really just think she's vying for a very cushy board position at one of our defense contractors.
Yeah, I very much think. I think somebody's described her as Dick Cheney in heels. I would very much say she reminds me of another creation out of 101 Dalmatians, the Cruella de Vil. She's just missing the cigarette holder. James, what's your thought on this woman who her husband? She had very little money in the bank, and suddenly she lives in a $5 million home. She's getting around about $15 million a year. Suddenly, her husband owns 2 defence firms. This is a woman that is also buying shares in Boeing, not only getting paid by Boeing, but she's not only making money off children dying, isn't she? But she's also buying shares in the companies that are producing the weapons that are killing these kids.
Yeah, my thoughts on that are, it's not a one-off incident. There's quite a few politicians that have come from virtually nothing to become multi-millionaires almost overnight, being supported by the industrial military complex or, other financial entities that have got interest in politics and connections with certain parts of the world that want to have political spheres of influence over the West in particular. It seems to me that it's the done thing as a politician nowadays, whether it's in America or the UK or certain parts of Europe, to sell your soul to the devil. You're quite happy to see people slaughtered left, right, and centre, whether it's women and children, as long as you're making a good buck out of it. It's something that needs to change. Politicians have never been perfect ever, but if I look back to even at Margaret Thatcher's time, and she was a bit of a tough cookie. I'm being nice there, by the way. But there was a degree of decorum, there was something there, but you look at the bunch that we've got now, in particular in America and the UK, and they've got no standards at all. They've got no professionalism really at all. They'll lie through their teeth. They're corrupt as hell, and it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get onto that because obviously they're compromised financially. But are they financially compromised as well? Sexually compromised as well, Sarah? I quote the Epstein list, which has been all over the news. Is this a way also, the good old honey trappers they used to use for spies? Now they're using it for politicians, aren't they?
Well, this has been going on for decades, this honeypot thing with Jeffrey Epstein. James brought up the corruption level, and I think that the corruption level's always been there. I think that just now they're just sloppy about it. It's kind of like the trajectory that we've just kind of gone on as a human race, where we're, especially in the United States, where we're just not ashamed of anything. Like everything is free game, and we pride parades, kink out on the streets. People having sex in the White House. That went away without even a blip on the radar. I mean, literal like sexual intercourse inside of the Senate hearing chamber. Like, this is insanity. And then we have this Epstein list. And you want to know what? The fact that what we just mentioned about the sex inside of the government halls has happened more than one occasion, has gone by without even a blink. You really think that this Epstein list is going to make the waves that we wanted to? We already have Alan Dershowitz saying that the women on the Epstein list are radical feminists who won't condemn Hamas for rape. Like you don't even know what's happening here. It is batshit crazy. I'm even sorry for my language, but
no, that's fine.
It is insanity, like the level of corruption. And it's not just the corruption, it's the level of we don't give a shit what you think, and you can't do anything about it. And that's the scariest part, because these people are, like James said, willing to kill children for money, and they're literally just putting genocide on full display. And if that's okay, where does the line? Where's the line?
And absolutely Hollywood and Dershowitz and people like that. James, people having sex in the Senate building, playing Brokeback Mountain or Mounted till his back broke. Which of these things, are they going to keep getting away with this nonsense?
If we allow them to get away with it, yes, they will. We haven't had any scandals in the press of British politicians having sex, but I don't know if you remember during COVID when there was the lockdown parties at Downing Street, it was reported several times that traces of cocaine were found in the toilets in various facilities. So they were obviously doing narcotics whilst having their parties. Obviously who was doing it exactly we don't know, but all the people there were either politicians or closely affiliated to the politicians. So it's a good guess that some of them were doing it. Yeah. As to who exactly was doing it, we can't say, but they don't care. They don't. I mean, Boris Johnson's reaction to this whole inquiry is, it's a load of rubbish, brush it, why are we making a fuss about it? It's not that important. And, Claire's right. It's the same thing in America. It's like, well, why are you making a fuss about it? It's, why can't we do this? We can do what we want, sort of attitude. I think it's down to the public to make a difference. And I think that in the general election, either early this year, I think it'll probably be later this year, because Rishi Sunak will put it off as much as possible because he knows he's cooked, he's done. I think, in all honesty, we're going to see a shock in that election. I think people that haven't voted before, who are disgusted with the way the politicians are handling themselves, they're disgusted with what's gone on, in particular with Gaza. They're not happy about the situation in Ukraine. A lot of people are starting to become aware of what's really happening there. There's going to be a lot of people that go out and vote who either never voted before and they're going to vote for something completely different, or they're just going to go out and vote. If they vote for Labour, they're not going to vote for Labour, or if they vote Conservative, they're not going to. There's going to be a change, I think. And I don't know how you're going to manage that in America, but something needs to happen there too.
Yeah. We
Go
won't
on, Sam.
have the same change, and that's because there's no level of decorum in American society like you guys have in the UK. We really are here. We are. How can we outdo the next person? What can we do on TikTok that's so scandalous? What about OnlyFans? Like, there's no public level of decency. So we want our politicians to be a direct reflection of who we are. And honestly, in the United States, they are. Like, that's the American people right now. We are so degraded and degenerated that anything goes. And just like you said, for really, when news like that comes out, most of the Americans' reaction is, why are you making a big deal about sex? Why are you making a big deal about cocaine? And it's because there's no big deal in society about it. We have a total degradation of any sort of values. We have no morals here. There's no moral fabric, no moral foundation in America. And you guys at least have opportunities. Whenever we try to run independent candidates, they're kicked off the ballots. So for us, it's not even the opportunity of getting someone in there. All of our choices are maniacal Zionists. We don't have a choice. It's RFK, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden are your 5 front runners for presidency, all raving lunatic Zionists. We don't have a choice. There's nothing that we can do. With you guys, you have a different sort of government. You're closer to your government. You have better access to your government. We don't. We don't have any access to those. And you see people like AOC, who started off as this young, bright, promising politician, and within a year she was co-opted by AIPAC, basically saying, like, help me, with her eyes, but co-opted nonetheless. So we don't really have these sort of opportunities. I think that for us, we may just have to wait for the inevitable collapse, sadly.
I must say, we do tend to pull them up here. I mean, Matt Hancock, when he was playing the 5-finger knuckle shuffle with his PA against the door in the Houses of Parliament, obviously in Downing Street, got booted out rather quickly. I think people were more shocked that this guy was able to have sex with his PA for the simple fact that when he with a look of him, he looked like somebody when you were looking in the back of a spoon. And then we had, obviously, the wonderful Tracy Brabin, who turned up at the ballot box looking like she'd done the 5 a.m. walk of shame. And of course, she trended on Twitter very, very quickly, with the British public turning around and saying, look, she'd been banged over. Look, she just got up to the ballot box and she looked like she'd been banged over a wheelie bin the night before. We do like a touch of decorum in our politicians, don't we, James?
Yes, we do. And I've got to be honest, I'm a bit old school, okay, and I know you are yourself, Warren. And I like manners, I like respect. I don't necessarily look for it everywhere in society. I understand society is society, but when it comes to the top end of society, these people should be setting an example, and they should be showing an example. And quite frankly, they're not. In fact, there's people right at the bottom of society that could do a better job with decorum, respect, and manners than some of these people at the top, and that's quite shocking.
It is, isn't it? Sarah, what I wanted to ask you is, how do we fix this? Do we, when it comes to the military taking aside the sexual things that are happening with Epstein, and I've got to say, it was glorious watching the left have a meltdown as they realised that Donald Trump was completely blameless in the Epstein thing, and then suddenly, they started to have one. Putting aside the moral side of it, is the answer on the being bought by the lobbyist, is the answer to be that you cannot accept any money from companies whatsoever if you run for the Senate?
I'm not well versed in British politics, but the money in American politics is out of control. And it started in the 90s with Newt Gingrich, and Nancy Pelosi kind of took it over the edge. Your literal job in the House of Representatives and the Senate is to raise money on committees from lobbyists. I can't remember the book that it was, but about this, but Nancy Pelosi gives them quotas. If you're on a committee, you have to raise a certain amount of money. Why?
Oh.
Why? And we have Citizens United, which makes companies and corporations into people and money into free speech. We've got so many issues here. That's why I say, like, we're so far down the rabbit hole. I'm not sure if there's a way to save us. other than just kind of letting the bottom fall out and seeing where the chips may fall, because we don't really, as citizens, we don't have any recourse. We've let them consolidate all of the power and money into these upper echelons, and there's nothing really left for us to even grasp in order to have recourse. So I'm not certain. I think that the outlook in America is very bleak in terms of politics. I think Donald Trump is the best option, but also a Zionist. So it's like, I'm not really sure. What's going on in the United States is not sustainable. And what I think may happen is that they won't let Donald Trump win, and then you'll see a real violent insurrection / civil / revolution. I don't know. Yeah.
It's one of those. Surely the gentleman turning up at the Pelosi household at 2 a.m. in the morning, being greeted by the husband in the underpants, he's probably a lobbyist, wasn't he, so?
Probably. And now we're actually seeing how deep the Epstein thing has created a ton of revelations for me. Especially as a geopolitical analyst, people look at this as just a scandal on face value with girls and pedophilia and all of the grotesque things. It's so much deeper than what people even know. Monica Lewinsky was a Mossad plant that then went on to blackmail Bill Clinton through Bibi Netanyahu, who got hold of her tapes and her conversations and all of the emails and everything, and blackmails Bill Clinton while involved in the Yugoslavian war. Like, this is affecting foreign policy. This is creating sex trafficking rings in places like Kosovo, Israel, Ukraine. They are all tied into Epstein, and people are getting hung up on whether Alan Dershowitz had his underwear on or not. I'm like, we have literal countries that have public policies in place that make them safe havens for sex trafficking, human trafficking, and this sort of like child pornography industry. And that's the thing that's scary about Americans. We get fixated on the surface level stuff because we have no in-depth analysis about these things. So to them, it's just, ew, gross. But I mean, she was only 6. She was like 16 or 17. Does it really matter that Bill Clinton had sex with her? And it's like, aside from that, there's a whole entire like Albanian Kosovar sex trafficking ring that's been going on since the 90s that Bill Clinton helped facilitate for Israel, because Israel is a safe haven for pedophiles and sex offenders. Yes. So they're all tied in together, and that I'm sad that that's the part that people are really going to miss. That these people, these NATO, EU, American elites have just quite literally raped the earth for everything that it was worth. Resources, people. It's just, the world is their oyster. They do whatever they want to us. And if we don't begin realizing that it is an us versus them, then again, we're just going to have to wait until the bottom falls out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. James, this is the easiest way to do this, isn't it? Is to put you in boxes. You go black, white, conservative, liberal, you go right wing, left wing, and then you go married or gay, and then you break them off into different boxes, of course, and you have gay, lesbian, trans, and stuff like that, and suddenly you've got all these divides, haven't you? And suddenly you've got the absolutely, for climate, against climate, and you, by bit, they chop you down and put you into these boxes. And of course, before you know it, you've got 132 different boxes with all these people in who believe this and this, that, and the other, but don't believe that. And that's so much easier to control, isn't it? It's just divide and conquer, isn't it?
Yeah, it is divide and conquer. Absolutely. And I've emphasised that so many times that the biggest thing that politicians and politics want, big business want, because let's make no mistake about it, big business, and we're talking big business, people like the Rothschild and that really have control of banks and things like that, military industrial complexes and all that. They run essentially the world, because without their financial clout, half these politicians, in particular in America, they're not going to get into power, because American politics is all about money. British politics, funnily enough, is going that way as well. I mean, for argument's sake, even to stand as mayor of London, before you get to the point of putting your name on the paper, if you get all the signatures you need, like George Galloway did, you've still got to find £10,000 as a deposit just to say that you're going to run as mayor. And then you're going to need, if you're going to do a small campaign, advertising campaign, and we're talking a very small campaign, you'd be talking, you'd need bare minimum 30, 35K. So to do a successful campaign, Sadiq Khan's campaign was funded by just Unite London East and Unite Left, was funded to the tune of 3.5 million.
Yep.
That was last time out. So British politics is going down the road of, unless you've got a lot of financial clout behind you, you're not going to get anywhere. And that is why Labour and Conservative are constantly looking for heavy funding, not just from, Labour's always looked to unions, but unions can't provide the sort of funding and clout that Conservatives have got, because Conservatives are using a lot of Zionist funding, they're using a lot of business funding, a lot of banking funding, and now Labour are adopting the same tactics because they have to. Sarah's right as well. The bottom's going to fall out of this, I do believe, in the sense that if things don't change, things will progressively continue along the road and get worse and worse and worse. And although we don't like to say it, but it's inevitable, in my opinion, that there would be civil unrest. And if the situation in America can't be changed, and it's impossible to change it, then the only inevitability for the United States is civil unrest. Not to mention the fact that the American dollar is going to fall flat on its arse, excuse my French.
Yeah. Moving on to civil unrest and things falling apart. We've not been being told, and I wanted to ask you specifically about this, Sarah, being an American. It has been very, very quiet, hasn't it, on our trans Iowa school gunman over there. We've not been hearing much about this person going into the school and shooting it up, have we? Is this because they have mental health issues and decided they were trans? Is this why we're not hearing about it very much in the media? I mean, if this was a white guy, a white, shall we say, they paint him as right wing, running amok in the school with a gun, we'd be hearing all about it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, well, trans people are a protected class in the United States. Again, you mentioned the divide thing. Well, that's just another fault line. They've elevated trans people up into this protected class. They can do no wrong. They're the constant victims. Anything that they do is just a reaction to the way that we treat them. There's a supposed trans genocide going on. It's psychotic here. Yes, they have a complete free pass. I hate to even cite him, Ian Miles Chung on Twitter, but I love that he just captions things, do whatever you want all the time. And it's just like people in America just doing whatever they want. And it's always trans people just acting crazy, like literally acting crazy. And they are definitely elevated into this protected class. And anything that I do is an expression of my gender. And it's absolutely psychotic. And we've actually legitimized the mental illness instead of addressing it. And that's why you see things like that. And it's a direct reflection of this legitimization of this clear mental illness. And who's going to, we literally have trans ads by Lockheed Martin. That's how bad it's getting over here, where the military and the military industrial complex is advertising directly to the gay and trans community. So yes, they are very much a protected class, and the United States sees them as a resource for pulling from, and they're doing that. So you won't hear anything. We still don't have the manifesto from the shooter in the Christian school. And in the Christian school, a trans man shot up a Christian school, and we aren't allowed to read that manifesto. But if it was a black or a white male, we would have had that manifesto within 24 hours off of Reddit and on every single platform. But since it's a trans female to male, a year and change later, we still haven't gotten to read the manifesto. Go figure.
That's crazy, isn't it? I want to get, because we're running short of time, I wanted to get one thing from you. So very quickly, give us a prediction for one thing that's going to happen in 2024. I'll start with James Rossi, and I'll let Sarah have a moment or two to think about it. James, give us a prediction for 2024. What's going to happen, buddy? One prediction.
I think what's going to happen in 2024, one prediction I think I'm bang on the money is the removal of the Palestinians from the occupied territories of Gaza, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the resettlement in various countries around the world, which is already being discussed, and also in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. That's my prediction.
Okay, lovely. Sarah, your prediction, what's the one thing that you think is going to happen in 2024?
James took the absolute most awful prediction that I kind of agree with. So I'll give a good prediction. I'm seeing complete capitulation of Ukraine probably sometime this year. The rising of Russia and the BRICS. We have all of our BRICS members that said yes, except for Argentina, dodged a bullet. And then, we're going to see a cumulative rising, and we're going to see nations that haven't had the chance to come up with them. We'll see Syria. You're talking about the rise of the DPRK. So I think that we're going to see very tangible elevation of BRICS and the East, and as the West continues its steady decline into the abyss of the Roman Empire. So I think that we'll see some really major changes, but I also agree with James, honestly, sadly.
Okay. And my prediction is going to be they are going to try and stop various elections by touting a massive cyber attack at some stage this year. And if it's not a massive cyber attack, it will be a bioweapons incident. But the WHO, the World Health Organization, this is my prediction, are going to try and get everybody's rights taken away from them so that they can implement either a biohazard or they can basically turn around and say, what is a health emergency? Because they can just put it down to mental health. And that's my big prediction, that the WHO are going to get even more power, and they're going to cause one of these things to happen and back it up. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Sarah, it's absolutely brilliant having you on. The time just flies by when you guys are on. And it makes the job so much easier. If you haven't seen the show before, or you're just new to it, as I say, please go and have a look at the frontline.army, and please go and have a look at the Real Truth on Patreon, the Real Truth 502, if you want to watch this daily show, longer videos on the frontline.army. Sarah, where can people find you?
Please visit ddgeopolitics.com, and I hope we see you guys in some of our subscriber-only spaces.
That would be fantastic. James, where can people find you on your social media?
TikTok, James Rossi 47. Facebook, James Rossi. Twitter, again, James Rossi. I can't remember my hashtag for that, but you can't miss me. I've got a picture of my wonderful face on there. I'm also on YouTube, Patreon, Rumble. I'm everywhere.
Absolutely fantastic. Hopefully we can all get along, and if you want to see Alan Dershowitz, he's probably appearing in a tree outside your bedroom window. Thanks very much indeed. It's been absolutely brilliant, and thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
The people have the power. Let us all
The tyrant class are stifling the truth.
Well, then sit down. We've heard your opinion.
The Truth and Network are distorting the truth. Only a handful truly stand for fact, reality, and justice. But it's time for change. It's time to bring everyone together with bite-sized, straight-up factual reporting
on the WHO
from a panel of contemporary journalists, each networked in their own field, and unlike others, unhacked, their integrity fully intact. War correspondents, political commentators,
they want us sick, compliant,
natural health advisors, and not to mention the amazing lineup of guests. A daily news show, a weekly roundup show to share with friends and family.
BBC One, the Pedor channel.
Don't trust them.
An uncensored newsletter. All of this for free and aimed at one objective, using the truth to win the war.
Now we're going to turn to people who are on the front line.
Warriors, mate.
The frontline.army. Together we are strong.
You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite. Let us all unite.